Welcome to the Human Conversation podcast with Jules White, the real dragon slayer, author and entrepreneur sales coach. Tune in weekly for human conversation about business and sales. Enjoy business expert interviews, educational episodes, and virtual cuppers with entrepreneur business owners. So grab yourself a cuppa and enjoy. Here is your host, Jules White.
So welcome everybody to the Human Conversation. And do you know, it has been over a year since I last recorded an episode. I can't even believe how fast that's gone, but we are back, which is super exciting. I've been away doing some retainer work, so just didn't find the time to podcast very much, and I'm so happy that I'm going to fit it in again in 2024. So, and to kick it off, I have the most wonderful guest with me, my dear friend and also a business associate now, Sharon Louca. So Sharon is the founder and the host of the multi-award winning, and that's very important, Women's Business Network. Sharon, welcome to the Human Conversation.
Thank you, Jules, and I'm very honoured to be your first welcome back guest. So thanks for having me.
I love that, the welcome back guest. No, it's great. And I think the thing about podcasting for me is I never wanted it to be this thing that ruled my life, and I had to do it here, there and everywhere, and managed to make, I think, 96 episodes over maybe 3 years. So I really did make them as I wanted to make them, which was lovely, because then I think it's a bit more wholesome. You know, that's how I felt about it. So to be back, to be able to pick it back up again, and here we go. It's a lovely, lovely feeling. So let us get going. Sharon, first of all, for the listeners, and of course, we publish this on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see our beautiful faces. For the listeners, tell us a little bit about what you do now, who you are, what you do now, and then we'll go into a little bit more of our human conversation.
Okay, no problem. So I'm a founder and host, as Jules has introduced, for the Women's Business Network. So we are a national online support network for women running their own businesses. We've only been online post-pandemic because prior to that, since 2014, I had been running my own networking events from my base in Tamworth in the Midlands. But COVID really created an opportunity for me because I took my group online to support my members through a really uncertain time when nobody really knew what was happening. And it just helped me to recognise that we could now work with people over a much wider geographical area. We'd become much more accustomed to remote working. So that just created an opportunity for me to do something I love on a much larger scale, because prior to that, my networking had literally just been a very small part of my business. But in 2020, I launched the Women's Business Network as its own company, and I am now focusing on just growing it from strength to strength, because that's really where my passion is, seeing women in business come together, support each other, and just provide that safe space to be yourself, gain help and support when you need it, and just continue on our business journey supporting each other.
Yeah, and it's a lovely, lovely network. We'll talk more about it as we go on with our conversation. But as I like to do, let me take you right back. Not many years, Sharon, not many years.
Too many years.
Let me take you back, because I love this question. What was it that you wanted to do when you left school?
I will be completely honest, I had no idea whatsoever. And it's really interesting we're talking about this, because I spoke last week at an event and talked about limiting beliefs, and I actually identified my biggest limiting belief was I'm not good enough, and that stemmed back to me not passing my O-levels in school. And it took me a long time to overcome that. So as I say, I had no idea when I left school. I was really disappointed with the results that I'd got, and basically just fell into secretarial college because that's what my mum had done. She'd done various secretarial roles. She'd worked at universities and what have you. And she said, just go to college and do a secretarial course. It'll just get you off on a path and then decide where you want to go from there. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do. But a few years in of doing secretarial roles and PA roles and what have you, I enjoyed the work, but I really felt I was meant for something more. And it's really interesting how I fell into my first sort of career was because I wanted a company car. I was driving around in a mini metro and I decided I wanted a newer car. I wanted something bigger, better and flashier. So I couldn't afford to go out and buy one. So I thought I've got to find a job that's going to give me a company car. So that's how I became an estate agent.
Amazing. So now we're okay. I love this so much already. So now we're on the rungs of sales.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
we've had conversations about sales in the past, haven't we, Jules? And I'm like, I'm not very good at sales. So why did a girl who is not very good at sales, was very shy, become an estate agent? You tell me. Because I wanted a company car.
It's really funny because anyone who's listening who's around our kind of age range, which is obviously very super young, will remember the mini metro, because I had a mini metro too, and it was one of those fabulous cars that we could actually afford to drive when we were young, wasn't it? So I remember my mini metro. I had a silver one, a Vanden Pla, which was the
mine was a
posh
red
version.
one.
But
And I had a mini before that.
It's amazing. So listen, the listeners will definitely now want to know, what was the car that you got? So
I got a red Astra, which for me was going up in the world.
yeah,
And
the
I'll never forget a few years into my estate agency career going to our head office at the time, which was in Knoll near Solihull, and going to pick up my brand new Rover. I think it was a Rover 45, and it was brand spanking new. I'd picked the colour of the interior, and I remember just driving down the motorway feeling like the bee's knees because I'd got a brand new car.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? The days of company cars. You know, I've had a few, obviously, because my career in sales was quite a long one. So I can almost do a podcast about company cars. Not that anybody would be interested in listening to it, but I do remember the first time I had a car that I actually picked, you know, with the color and the model and everything. Because before that, I used to inherit the pool car. So the car they'd already got, I used to get the pool car. That's what I was known for. But it was lovely getting that car, you know, that first car, and then driving it around. So estate agency. So come on, spill the beans. What was it like? How long did you last? Did you actually learn to love it?
I lasted about 7 years,
wow.
and I did enjoy it. I'll be honest, I did enjoy it. And I think the reason I came out of it was I think I just got to a point where it was very much face-to-face sales, front on sort of, and I always remember my desk was the first one when anybody came into the office. So whenever a house sale fell through or whatever, I was the person who got the brunt of all the people being frustrated, obviously, that they'd lost their buyer. They weren't now going to be able to buy the dream home. And I think I just got a little bit worn out by just having to deal with all this, and especially in that face-to-face environment. I decided. I was also nearly how it didn't happen, thank the Lord it didn't, but I don't know if you remember, some years ago there was a young girl that was taken from a house.
Yes.
Stephanie Slater was abducted from a house, and I was working for an estate agency in the same area. And we literally had an empty house 3 doors away from where she was taken. And I was working when it happened. The police came in to tell us they were trying to trace who this man was who'd taken her, to see if we'd shown him around a house. And so that's
scary, isn't it? Scary time. And there was another lady, Susie Lamplugh.
A
long time ago.
I
don't think they ever found her, did they? I
can't remember they didn't.
Story. It's interesting, isn't it, when you think about the danger that we feel we're in sometimes. And particularly, I was watching, there was a program recently about Sarah Everard, I think her name was.
Yes.
The young lady who got
Yes,
murdered by the police officer.
that's right. Yeah.
And there was a program on about that. We digress a little bit, but I think it's coming back to the point was I started to wonder how safe I truly felt when I'm out doing my walking. I'm currently doing my 10,000 steps a day for cancer research. So I'm walking down, you know, what we call the Redways in Milton Keynes, and parts of those are you're very on your own, you know, and sometimes I do sort of think to myself, oh, how safe do I really feel, you know? And I've not always thought that way. I think I've been a little bit oblivious to it, but I feel sometimes as I got a bit older, a bit more like that. So it's interesting that you
and
bring
I
up
think
that.
I think I was very naive back in those days, when I think the times I was in empty properties with men on their own, where I can vaguely remember one situation that thankfully I got myself out of quite quickly. But yeah, in hindsight now, I think, what was I doing, and why was I allowed to go to meet a complete stranger who nobody knew who they were, and they were sending me off to an empty house when who knows what could have happened. So
yeah, it's a big conversation in its own right, that one, I
yeah.
think, isn't it, Sharon? But so you've done your estate agency for 7 years. What's
Yeah.
next? What happened next?
Okay. Then an opportunity came via a friend to still stay. So it was still sort of staying within the same sort of area, in so much as I moved to work for NatWest Bank, and I was selling mortgages. So again, I'm selling again.
Amazing.
Doesn't come naturally, but so I was working in an inbound call centre in the centre of Birmingham, and I was arranging and setting up mortgage applications over the telephone, and basically guiding people through the whole application process, credit checking them, getting them approved for their loans. 8 years I did that for.
And that was inbound, so people were calling in.
They were ready to buy, so there wasn't really the selling, but they were, I suppose, to a certain extent there was a little bit, because they perhaps would be coming on just for a quote and just to find out if they could borrow. And then it was we were targeted, so it was still a targeted sales environment.
Amazing. And of course, my first job was at NatWest when I left school
I
at
didn't know
16.
that.
It was. My mum said to me when I left school, so just to touch on what you said earlier, I did my O-levels. I got rubbish results. I think I ended up with 3, and I got the best I got was a B, which was art. I wasn't going to do anything with that. And then I got a couple of C's, and the rest of them were just pointless, even telling you what grade I got, kind of thing. So I decided I wanted to just go out and start working and earn money. And then one of the things my mum said to me back then was, because we didn't have email and stuff like that, she said, write 50 letters to the companies in the area and ask them if they'll give you a job. And it's exactly what I did. I hand wrote 50 letters, and I got 3 jobs. One was an insurance company, one was a building society, Halifax, and one was NatWest Bank. And so I took the NatWest Bank job. So it's interesting, isn't it, how we've got kind of some crossovers, really. Mine was obviously in the back room, on the machine room, and then on the counter, and I was traditionally a branch route I went, rather than call centre. But that was my first job, NatWest Bank. So we have that in common as well.
Yeah,
so you're doing your mortgages, you've done your estate agency, and what's really interesting is every time you say to me, yeah, but I'm no good at sales. But actually, you know, this is a big perception, isn't it, that we have, that we're no good at it. But ultimately, it's just about having a conversation. And, you know, that's what I always say. So you clearly were good enough to do those jobs you did. Did you then progress on to something very different, or did you stay in that kind of sales environment? Because obviously you've got 2 boys. So at some point your children came into play.
Yeah. So while I was at the bank, I started off just as a mortgage seller. Then I took my financial exams, which I passed all 3 of them.
Amazing.
Which is really weird, because when I recall exams, I always think of the ones I failed. You don't remember the ones that you passed. So I was actually a qualified mortgage seller then, so I was able to give some advice, only mortgage related advice, but I was able to give advice. And during my time at the bank, that's when I had my 2 boys. So I took the maximum maternity leave I could each time, and then went back. And I actually finished my time at NatWest. The last 12 months working there, I actually moved from off the sales floor into the HR. So I was actually then interviewing and recruiting people for the two roles that I used to do. So yeah, I was actually part of the HR team, which I love that part of it. Actually, I loved interviewing people and just sharing about the role and what they were coming into.
Yeah.
And at the time, it was when RBS were just buying out NatWest. So there was lots of changes going. I'd been 6 months back from maternity leave. I was only working part-time, and they sent a notification we'd all got to go to Manchester. So my team went up on the train to Manchester for a 10-minute meeting to say that we were all out of a job, basically.
Sharon.
Yeah, they were restructuring our department, that our department was going to be relocated to Manchester. There was an opportunity. I could have stayed at the bank. There was other roles I could have gone into, but I was 6 months after having my second child. I was very much in mommy and baby brain mode. So
Yeah.
I just couldn't sort of manage that. So I had an extra year at home with my boys.
Amazing.
And then just felt that I needed something. I loved being a mom, but I needed something else for me as well. I needed to still keep my brain a bit more active. So I started supporting my husband in his business. He was growing a car sales site. So it's funny that my first interest in cars ended up marrying a car salesman. Yeah, we worked together for 3 years, and I supported him in his business. His business was quite established by then, but I basically just ran all the admin function of his business, and it worked really well until the recession came along. So yeah.
So at what point did you start your own business? Because at some point you did become an entrepreneur. So when did that happen?
Yeah, so in 2009, basically I've been working with my husband for 3 years. Everything had been going really well. His business had been going really well. And then the recession just came along, and his overheads for the site where we were, and they introduced the scrappage scheme. So he was struggling then to get the cars and the stock in to be able to keep the business going. So he ended up having to downscale the business, and he basically said to me, you're going to have to either go and get a job, go back to the bank, or do something. We can't both rely on this to support us any longer. And at the time, I'd got used to the flexibility of us being our own bosses and being able to work around my children. So I thought, I know, I'll start a business. That's the easier option of the two.
Don't we know it?
I laugh every time I say that, because I just think, how naive was I thinking that was the easy option. But yeah. So that's
you and me
so I
both.
wasn't an aspiring business owner. It was more out of necessity of being able to work on my own terms and around my children, and still bring in some money.
So what was your business?
So my first business I set up as Your Local PA, which was a virtual PA basically. And at the time, they were a very new concept, because I'd go to networking. I thankfully discovered networking about 5 months into starting my business. Otherwise, I don't think I'd have seen it to a year. But and I used to turn up and say I'm a virtual PA, and I used to get some very strange looks, and people are, what's one of them then? Whereas now that everybody's got one, or knows at least half a dozen. So but I just recognised that there must have been lots of people around who were like my husband, very good at what he did, but not necessarily when it came to the admin side of running a business. So I just decided there's got to be other people like him that are going to welcome the support to get better organised and use my skill set that took me back to my secretarial days.
Everything connects, doesn't it? When you think about what you're telling us with your story, it's all sort of connecting back. So you did that for how long? Did you do the kind of PA piece?
It went on for quite some time, because 5 years into running that, I was supporting a lady through my PA business, who just got me more and more involved in her business, and then offered me a 50% share in her existing business. So that's when I developed more into a quality environmental management consultant.
And there it is. I wondered where that connection was.
But at the same time, because my business partner was already beyond retirement age at that time, I knew that this wasn't necessarily going to be a long-term thing. And I didn't know if it was something that I'd want to do long-term on my own at the point that she did finally decide to retire. So I agreed to go into business with her on the understanding that I could still retain my PA clients as well. So I did actually run the two businesses alongside each other for the 5 years that we were in business together.
Right.
So it's probably only been, I think, about 12 in the last 12 months that I've let go the last one of my PA clients. So
That's
yeah,
so interesting. So it did go over quite a long period of time,
yes,
didn't it?
yeah,
But
yeah.
how smart of you, when you think about it, you were preempting really what you would be wanting to do in the future. And I think that's really smart. That's forward thinking right there for you. I think as business owners, we kind of have to do a bit of that, don't we?
I think as great as the opportunity was, I just felt that I'd worked so hard to build this business that and because the future was uncertain, I didn't know whether I'd have the ability or the knowledge to be able to continue the quality work on my own. So I thought I've got to keep something. Obviously, I had to let some of it go because I couldn't have managed two full-time jobs. But yeah, just to be able to still retain those existing clients was just that peace of mind for me that I knew that. And I think it was because of when I went into business, that financial difficulty that we experienced. I didn't want to put myself in that position again. So,
Yeah. I think
yeah.
for me, obviously having been through the stuff I went through, I hated that whole, where am I going to be in 5 years' time, and making these really long-term plans, because I'd realized that actually life isn't always like that. And we suddenly hit things that we never expected, which just changes everything. But I do think there's also this element of saying, practically, well, hang on a minute. In an ideal world, what is it I want to be doing, in the next 2 or 3 years? And so I think there's an element of forward planning we should think about, but I'm just not a massive fan of making these big long-term plans, because ultimately life changes. You and I know all about that as
Absolutely.
well. And I know, obviously, I never even asked if you wanted to talk about this, but I know you obviously went through, a very difficult time when your husband was poorly. So how did that impact your business? Because there'll be listeners, I think, who have either had similar experiences, or they just want to understand that resilience piece that goes with this.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? My husband was diagnosed with a pituitary brain tumor in 2016, and I think the fact that he didn't have particular physical symptoms that he had to live with. More for us was the not knowing and the worry of what it could turn into. We were ultimately told that it wasn't a life-threatening, it wasn't cancerous, but potentially if it continued to grow, then the risk was that he would lose his eyesight, and ultimately they did say that depending what happened, he would ultimately possibly need to have an operation. So there was a lot of uncertainty we were living with, but fortunately he was still able to work, and we were still able to have a relatively normal life, other than that sort of niggling in the back of our minds, not knowing what the future held or what could happen. And I think we just both made the decision that between each appointment we would just get on with life, just be positive and just deal with it as each appointment arose, basically. So we'd try and just sort of, it never leaves you completely, obviously, but try and push it to the back of our minds as much as we could, and carry on in between times. So that's what we did up until 2022, when he did have to have the operation. And fortunately, it had been delayed because of COVID, but they called him in, and literally within 2 weeks he was in and had the operation. So I think in hindsight, not having too long a lead up to the operation, or knowing it was coming, was probably the best thing for us both, because we didn't really have much time to think about it before it was done. It was over, and thankfully he was home again. So
Great. And that was a very successful.
It was a huge success.
Wonderful.
He's very, very lucky, and we're very, very
Wonderful.
grateful.
They're so nice, and I'm really glad we were able to just touch on it, because it brings the human to our stories that we have, because nobody knows what goes on.
No, that's it. And I didn't talk about it until it got really near to the time of the operation. Nobody even knew my husband had been living with a brain tumor for 5 years, because I just chose not to talk about it, not for any specific reason. I think we just wanted to just keep everything as normal as possible. So people close to us and our friends knew, but not necessarily a wider sort of audience or work-related colleagues.
So you're an amazingly resilient lady, which is very clear, and it's important, I think, that you acknowledge that, because whilst we have a privacy element that we like to uphold, it's all a personal thing, isn't it? What we want to and what we don't want to talk about. But I think acknowledging the fact that you are a very courageous and resilient woman to go through that, I think that's really important. Because whilst you said, oh, well, he was able to carry on working, etc., the mental stress of sitting on what was essentially a time bomb, that must be just super difficult. So I think you're inspiring, really, when I chat to you, even when we just have our little chats away from a podcast. You've got such a lovely energy about you, which brings me very nicely onto the Women's Business Network, because that's where we are now. That's your business now, your focus.
It is.
It's a beautiful group. You and I just had a chat about when we met. We said it was about 2018. Yes, that was about 6 years ago now, which scares me how fast that's gone. And I've been really honoured to be able to be one of your, we call it an expert, don't we? I've been able to be this kind of spokesperson on the subject of sales within your network, and done a couple of talks for you. I love your group, amazing women, and I love how you've now expanded that group and gone on to do other things. Tell us first of all about the Women's Business Network, because you mentioned it at the very beginning. What are the aspirations for that now? Because it is a real focus now, isn't it? It's the core business now.
And it's interesting you said about the resilience, because again, I'm happy to share, but this time last year, I was going through a really difficult time, and I think I'd got to a point where I'd kept going for so long with everything that we'd been through, that I suddenly reached a point where I couldn't keep going anymore. And about February time last year, I think I was really on the verge of burnout. I'd been poorly a couple of times, and I'd just reached that point where I'd had enough, and I thought, I can't carry on like this. Something's got to change, because if I don't, then who knows what the outcome could be. So I really reassessed where I was, what I was doing. I was feeling very stressed, because as well as running the network, I was still looking after all my quality clients as well. And I also at the same time sat a program that was offered by a coach that I've been introduced to, who's based out in Antigua, and she's very much around following your heart and really listening to your sort of your inner wisdom and following your heart. And when you find your business and what you're meant to be doing, your true nature and passion and purpose, then you're more in flow, and life becomes so much easier. And through doing that, and because of how I was feeling and what I was experiencing, it just really identified to me where my heart lay, and that was in the support network that I run. So over the last 12 months, I've done a lot of work on myself, and a lot of sort of letting go of things that don't serve me anymore, so that I can really focus my time and attention. And 2024 is dedicated to growing the network and supporting more women. So
brilliant.
Yeah,
So what's the format?
Yeah, we meet online via Zoom. We do 2 meetings per month. We run business clinics. Our members get their opportunity to share their story. We have guest speakers, and as you said, Jules, our members love it when you can come on and share your wisdom with them. We've had speakers from all over the world who come along, and we look at either a personal development or a business topic, and that's every month we do that. We also believe very much in collaboration over competition. So as you know, we are very proud of our book that we wrote last year. So the Women's Business Network Guide to Becoming a Successful Entrepreneur is a collaborative project where 20 of our members just work together to share words of wisdom, advice, stories, to help fellow business women. And I think we're all at different stages of our journey, but we all recognise that we would have loved a book like this when we started out to just help us to shortcut and perhaps not make some of the mistakes that we did. So yeah, we do collaborative projects like that. We've now this year introduced, we do co-working sessions where we come onto Zoom and just work away alongside each other, but hold each other accountable to work on our business or a specific task without getting distracted or dragged away to do something else. So we have dedicated time that we do that. And yeah, we're just all about supporting and encouraging women to get that support network around them, because I think it's really, really important when you're running a business, and especially if you're working from home on your own, it can be really, really lonely. So knowing you've got people who you can turn to for advice and support at any time is just really important.
It is, and I love the way you've structured it in this kind of co-working online together. It's just fabulous. How cool is that as an idea? I just love that. I have to join one sometime because I haven't been to one yet. And every time you put it up, I think I must go because I want to see what that's like, you know. And it is lonely. It's super lonely when you're on your own working from home. And I think it's dangerous to think that you can just do that and everything's okay and you don't really need that network around you, because you do. You know, there's no question. We are human and we're built to be in communities. And I think we just have to make sure that's said out loud. And what you do allows that. It's lovely. You can share your story as a member. You can have guest speakers, which help you to learn and grow, business clinics. It's just such a lovely format you've got. And then there's a membership fee, I think. Monthly membership, is it?
You can either join as an annual member, it's currently £299, or you can be a monthly member, which is £30 a month, and that's just until the end of March, because we will be increasing our prices from the 1st of April. So anyone who's looking, get in now, and then
get in now,
pay less.
Get in now, guys. But it's great value, you know, when you think about, you know, that price, and then think about the value you get out the other side of it is amazing. So you know, look how far you've come in terms of that girl who left school with this belief that she was never actually going to amount to anything, and suddenly now when you look at where you've come and what you've achieved and the skills you've learned on the way, if you think about your career path, it's just lovely story, isn't it? And I guess I want to sort of conclude the conversation with your latest project, you know, because there's no stopping you, Sharon Louca, is there? And your latest project, which I just thought was really smart, is a collaboration project. Now, you talked just a second ago, collaboration over competition. And isn't that a great way to look at it? Because actually, why do we see other people as competitors, you know? So tell me how this came about, because it's really, really smart. Tell us what you did and how it came about.
Yeah. Well, we were approached by Karen Heap, who I've only got to know more recently, really. She runs her own network on a more of a face-to-face offering she has, where she runs meetings throughout the Midlands area, Warwickshire, that sort of area. And she just recognised that, again, she's a true believer of collaboration over competition, that she would love to host an event where she brought the local networks together, basically, so that we could all support each other's networks and just be able to connect with new connections. So she approached myself and Sandra Garlick from Woman Who and Dawn Owen, who runs the High Vibe Tribe. And basically, I think she'd barely even opened up the conversation about what she was planning. We were all like, yeah, we're in. So we didn't take much persuading. But it's been a fantastic project to work on. It's probably been 6 months in the making, but we basically hosted the event last Friday for International Women's Day, and we had 80 women in the room who were there to basically connect, to network, to learn from the four of us, just sharing knowledge and tips on how they could really get the most out of their networking activities. And we had everybody moving all around the room so that they could connect with people as well. And the feedback and testimonials that we've had from the event is absolutely fantastic. So even before we left the venue on Friday, we'd already decided we were doing it again.
The announcement's gone out with the dates for next year. What's the date? What's the date to put in the diary?
7th of March 2025. So
7th of March 2025, guys. Oh my goodness. I need to pause for a minute thinking that we're going into the year 2025 next year. That's so scary. This is wonderful. I think the big thing for you personally, Sharon, because you and I chatted about this, you know, one of the things that I absolutely love is speaking. I love getting on a stage. I like doing virtual speaking. It's part of my portfolio now, really, is what I do as a speaker. And I knew that you had to get on stage, and for that day, you were a speaker. Quite rightly, you know, you're heading up your network. You're one of the four. You had a session of your own that you ran, and you were on stage speaking. Just tell us quickly what happened.
I think I have to say that if anyone had said to me 15 years ago, you will get up on a stage and deliver a speech to anybody, I'd have said never in a million years, because if that is my ultimate out of my comfort zone, public speaking. I've always had a fear of public speaking. I've been really shy since a child. I'm an introvert. Networking never came easy, which still amazes me. I run my own network now, but it never came easy to me. I've always had to push myself out of my comfort zone for the last 15 years, really. And I really feel when I stepped up on that stage, it was almost that 15 years had all led up to that point when I had to step up on stage, and I just put so much work. I mean, I was really open and honest even on stage, because I structured my talk where it was interspersed with stories about my experience. We were talking about embracing authenticity and the power of vulnerability. So I talked about my own experience. I talked about failing my exams. I even talked about the fact that I had a real wobble a few weeks ago and thought, I can't do this. I can't get up on that stage and do it. And I stood there and actually told that to the audience. And I just put so much work and effort into that, because I knew it's something I had to overcome. And especially because I was collaborating with 3 people who I really look up to, I thought I can't be the weakest link and let the side down. So I've got to go and I've got to deliver. And I just thought, if I can just deliver a speech that has impact and resonates with at least one person in the room, then I'm happy. And well, the feedback and response that I've had from it is absolutely amazing. Right from when I stepped off stage, people were coming up to me and thanking me and said how much it had resonated with them. And it is just fabulous. It's done the world of good for my confidence, and something I now realise can't be a one-off. I need to continue to do this, because it made a difference, and that's what I wanted it to do.
It's for the audience ultimately. Whenever we stand on a stage, it's actually not for us, it's for the audience. But the big bonus for you, I think, is that it was for you too, to be able to realise that actually you had a voice, you had your stories to tell that were actually impactful.
And the amount of people who said to me, who I've known for a long time, had no idea I felt like that. And even the ones who didn't know me said, I would never have guessed, because it was sort of halfway through my talk that I actually confessed that I had been really nervous. And people said that they had no idea. They said I looked really confident, really comfortable, as though I'd done it time and time again before. And I said, no, that's the biggest thing I've ever done. I'm so happy.
I'm so happy, because our conversations obviously were just I knew you were nervous, but I also knew that you would be fabulous, and it would make such a difference to you, I think, having done it. So I'm
no,
so
thank you for
happy.
your help, because there's so many people along the way who I've turned to for advice and support just to get me through it. So
It's always a
thank
pleasure.
you.
It's amazing. So look, we've now got your journey really noted on a podcast. And so it's just been so lovely having a human conversation with you, finding things out about you that I didn't know, because we always do. All the links to your business and any other things like the book, etc., will be in the notes from this podcast. So thank you so much for joining me. I guess one last question would be, what is your one biggest piece of advice? And you don't know I'm going to ask you this. Your one biggest piece of advice to women out there who are starting their businesses?
I think the biggest advice I can give anybody is to believe in ourselves, because I've been on a journey and I haven't believed in myself for a lot of the time that I've been in business. And you need to stop comparing yourself to everybody else. Stop telling yourself you're no good, because you can do anything you put your mind to. If you're determined and you want something to happen, you can make it happen. You have the power to do it. It's only yourself that's holding you back.
Yeah, brilliant. And my dad said, there's no such word as can't, didn't he? Which is exactly the same message. Oh, Sharon, thank you so much for joining me. It's been
Thank
really
you for having me.
wonderful. And listeners, I hope that you've enjoyed the return of the Human Conversation podcast. You see, I've got the bug now. I'm ready now to make more episodes. I love this. If you want to listen to us, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on SoundCloud, and we're also on YouTube, because we publish this, as I mentioned, with our beautiful faces too. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time on the Human Conversation. Ta-ta for now.
You've just been listening to the Human Conversation podcast with Jules White. To find out more about the other work that Jules does, please visit her website, www.liveitloveitsellit.co.uk. And if you enjoyed the podcast, then please do leave a rating and review on the platform you use to enjoy her show. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.